Second point is this, is that when we are discouraged by hatred, prayer is essential. And this sounds so elementary here this morning, but it's important that we understand this. We see that Nehemiah here, he comes up against this very severe opposition from Sanballat and Tobiah, and he's starting to sense, wow, this is kind of getting out of hand. These people really are angry with us. And he's beginning to realize this serious opposition. And this is what he says here in verse 4. We see the reaction. He begins to turn to God in prayer. And he starts off, he says, "Hear, O God, we are despised." And we recognize real clearly that this is a man who is not necessarily worried, but I do believe he's somewhat discouraged by the reality that there are those who would just think that what they're doing is wrong. And he is moved by that, and he recognizes clearly who those people in opposition are. And then this is what he says. I love this. He begins to pray for those people. How does he pray for them? Have you noticed? He begins to he calls out to God, "Bring your wrath upon their head." Did you see that? I mean, boy, this is, now, we're going to talk a little bit about this here for a moment, but this is the reality that we see in Nehemiah's life. He says, "Come on, Lord, deal with these people, okay? Deal with them now." He says this. He says, "Hear, O God, for we are despised." And then he says, "Turn back their taunting on their heads and give them up to be plundered in the land." He's not praying that God would bless them, is he? In fact, he's praying completely the opposite. He says, "I pray that you would plunder their land where they're captive. Do not cover their guilt, and let not their sin be blotted out from your sight." But look at what he says here. He says, "For they have provoked you to anger in the presence of the builders." Here's the important truth that we understand about Nehemiah's prayer that we need to grasp here, is that what Nehemiah has recognized is this is greater than himself here. That this opposition that is being brought upon Nehemiah really has not a lot to do with him. It has everything to do with them opposing God, going against God. And so he cries out and he says, "God, we're despised here. We're hurting down here. I mean, we're wondering about all of this." But then here's what he does. He doesn't just pray to God. He prays turning it over to God. In other words, he believes in the sovereignty of God. He believes that God is in control. And he turns it right back over to God. He says, basically, in essence, he says, "I am not going to worry about this, God. Here's the deal. They're sinning against you. Deal with it." And so we see this amazing prayer that he brings forward. Now think about your life for just a minute. Think about how your faith has been tested for just a moment. How will we respond when our faith is tested? How is it that we respond when we come up against this sort of opposition? I think what we see here in this passage is really it's really pretty amazing. Because what we see here is really just honest emotions being revealed. Here's Nehemiah. Remember, he's writing in his journal, right? And we see this honest sort of, what he's really feeling inside. He's pretty angry with these people, right? He's angry with them, and he is crying out to God to do something about it. And I think it's very important that we as believers, we respond with honesty to God. Now here's something that I want to point out here. One of the things that we often do when we come up against this sort of attack from people in the world, when they come up against us, many times we do get angry about it. And I think there's a point where that anger could be a healthy sort of anger, but then there's also a time when we could cross the line. And this is a place where we see Nehemiah, where he gets angry about it, and there's this bit of a healthy sort of anger that kind of comes up against this, but he never crosses the line. And I want us to look at this for just a moment. I think we can understand it. I want to show you a quote here, read you a quote this morning by C.S. Lewis. He's talking about how people in Psalms are always praying to God and saying, "God, send forth your wrath upon my enemy." And he's talking about these sorts of people. In other words, he's stating that when God is mocked, we should be angry about that, because it is the people that are going against God, not just people that are attacking us, but they're attacking God's work. And so C.S. Lewis would say that we need to be angry about this. Listen to this quote here. He says, the absence of anger is most alarming symptom, and the presence of indignation, that is righteous anger, that's how that could be defined there, may be a good one. For if we look at the railings, that is the prayers from the psalmist, and here in Nehemiah as well, when we look at the railings, we find that they are usually angry not simply because the things have been done to them, but because these things are manifestly wrong and are hateful to God as well as the victim. And so what we see here is that what Nehemiah is angry about is he's not angry about the attack on himself. He's angry that these people are opposing God. As we think about our life, and we think about the situations that we're going through in life, as we think about those hardships that we face as individuals, and we think about opposition that is against us, it is important that we understand how to respond to that opposition. Now here's what I want to point out to you. Romans 12:14 says this. He says, bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse them. And so when we respond to the opposition that comes up against us as individuals or even as the church, it's important that we remember that we don't throw the stones back. We respond like Nehemiah responds, in that we cry out to the holy and righteous God, and then we give it to Him to deal with. That's what he's doing here.